Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Mosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello and welcome back to the Lost Signals Reviews Film and TV. We're continuing on our journey through the world with... This month we are doing Asian films, and we decided to do a film from Thailand and chose Ong-Bak. So I am Steve Ramosi. I'm going to be your host, and joined today by Jonathan Ye Mazur.
And I'm going to have everything in 3 takes.
And Scott Thurlow.
Muay Thai, not master.
And I'm going to give the funny log line for this one. It's Mortal Ong-Bak.
Yeah, that's perfect.
A very good. It feels like it references so many movies. Yeah. Mortal Kombat being a very strong one.
It fits amazingly well as well.
So let's get right to the review. I'm going to start with Ian with the plot.
So, in a surprisingly straightforward hero's journey, which is one of the reasons we have the Star Wars poster up behind us. A young man who lives in a rural area who happens to be a Muay Thai master. The local Buddha head gets stolen for the titular Ong-Bak, and he must recover the head
by some no good nicks,
lest the gods punish the village for not being able to do the ceremony. So he travels away from home while being given money and special herbs by the village elder to go off to the dastardly Bangkok filled with hooligans of all types, where he befriends one of them who is also was a man from his village who got corrupted by Bangkok, and the guy's girlfriend / friend / whatever they were.
I think they're sort of like scam partners, pretty much.
Yeah, and so then he has to work his way up through the gang to recover the head, and he ends up doing that. What I really like about this is it's a slow build-up to both violence and comic absurdity. It really doesn't get really strange in its fight scenes until like halfway through. And it doesn't get really violent until the last section of the film. And it feels very earned. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be a comedy. It just feels that it's a martial arts flick that
has some funny
falls
stuff
into a strange comedy. And it ends up working really well. So my one critique is that the opening section did feel a little bit generic. And perhaps that did service the later sections of the film. But I'm somewhere between a 2 and a 3, so I'm going to let you guys build it.
Yeah, so like I see what you mean, and yes, it's a very obvious like hero's journey cycle. Perhaps like the most like the easiest way you can have it, like looking at the patterns. So like I do agree that it wasn't like bad by any means, but the setup was something you've seen so many times because of that very thing, right? So like it was fine, but you're right, like the movie doesn't really like kind of pick up, if you will, until he gets to Bangkok and starts, he finds Hamle, the guy who was from his village, and he gets entangled in like the gang wars, if you will, trying to track down the stolen statue head and all that. So yeah, like it was pretty strong, but I don't think it's enough for a 3. But I certainly am probably like I think I can give it a very easily a solid 2.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to go with a 2 on this. Honestly, the plot is not that great. I
mean, it's a simple story at the end of the day.
The exploration, I guess, to some degree, although they don't do a lot of exploration, but like the running through of the hero's journey really helps this movie out, I think. But it's not like I feel like the script writers and the people working on this movie were not like focusing on the plot. And like this movie is really, I actually suggested it, and I had been hearing about this for years. I don't think either of you guys had heard about it before.
I was completely unfamiliar with this film.
We watched it, but I was like, I wasn't expecting this movie. It's super enjoyable, not because it has like this brilliant plot or anything, but just because it's a really fun martial arts movie that has a lot of comedy built into it that's actually very funny from, at least in terms of my sense of humor. And I think that you guys would kind of agree with that, because we were laughing through a lot of this movie. It's one of the funnier movies I've seen in a long time.
I think twice this film applauded choices they made in that. And
that's saying something nowadays, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to give a ton of credit to the plot, but it's certainly good enough to get a 2 for me. And I think that it's going to make that up in a lot of the other points that we're going to give for it as we go on, in terms of my ranking of the film anyway.
Well, the main character Ting, the actor seems like a skilled martial artist.
Played by Tony Jaa.
Yeah. He does a fine job. And also his kind of partner in this, Humley, was it?
Humley,
or George. As he was trying to, I guess,
trying to be a cool city kid.
It's a city name,
a common name in Bangladesh.
And actually,
Bangkok.
And we'll talk about the characters later, but I really loved His character.
But the point I'm trying to make is they're trying to, they're using the plot as a framework for the martial arts and for the comedy of George, and it's just a framework.
Absolutely.
On that part, so.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't argue with that.
So it sounds like 2's all around for that?
Yeah.
All right. Scott, why don't you take us into the themes?
Pay your respects to your local village religious ceremonies, I suppose. I mean, like, again, I don't know. I'm not saying it's lacking a theme. Like, certainly, like, the hero's journey thing, like you said, is sort of baked/built into it. It's like, that's going to be part, like, of the thematic through lines, if you will. But I don't know, again, if it's, like, saying all that much. Now, there is, I think we all would agree that Humley's character does have a very nice arc to him himself.
Right.
So, like, I don't know, man. This one, like, I may just default to a 0, but I can totally be convinced of a 1. It's just that I didn't really see that much thematically in it beyond what I just said, because it has, like, by nature, the elements of your standard hero's journey, more or less.
Well, what are the themes of the hero's journey and what mythology in general? And it is to attempt to define what the values of a culture are in a lot of ways. So this was definitely looking at rural life in Thailand is more noble, or not noble necessarily, but Bangkok versus the town that they originated in. Where Bangkok really doesn't have any good people in it. And in fact, Homley is the one character
like the decadence
who went to study to become a monk and fell because he was corrupted by the city. So it's the idea of, like, the spiritual nature of the Buddha and the Ong-Bak ceremony. And I think that's what they're really going for, in that the corrupting city life in that part. And it's not perhaps the most the greatest
profound
kind of theme,
thing
but
ever,
it is one of those, like, kind of basic, like, I think of, like, I guess 50s Americana style thing of, like, the suburbs being a great place of where America really lied. And I think this is saying that Thailand is, at its heart, its rural nature.
I mean, that's totally fine. Like, I don't begrudge that. I don't think it's, like, completely out of nowhere. But so, what do you think, Steve?
I mean, that's almost exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. It's like, basically the theme is city bad. Like, stick to your roots. Stick to your village, and that's good. Like, the city has this corrupting influence on people,
I suppose.
Especially when it comes to Hamle and in his part in this, where he comes from the village, and they really show how he has become this con artist seemingly because he went to the city. And even though he's supposed to become a monk, he kind of gets away from that to go be a con artist. And then he has this revelation throughout the movie and and like the theme is almost tied into his character arc.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's saying. Yeah.
And as you mentioned, and I think that is a big part of what is trying to be put across in this in Ong-Bak, and I think that is a fairly strong theme in this. I don't think I agree with like city corrupts people and you should go back to your traditionalist roots or anything like that. But like it is a
certainly there. Yeah.
I think that it's well done in this movie that they
No, you're right. I mean, it was
say what they
it was
want to say
integrated
about
very
that.
nicely, and like we'll agree with that. So maybe I'll give it like a fine one at the end of the day. Like I said, I don't think it was weak or anything. It just maybe not like was the focal point, but certainly what you guys just said was definitely there. You could see it in the film.
One last point is Ting himself, in order to beat the corrupt city thing, has to give up on the passive, like not the pacifist, but the non-violence or non-lethality of his actions. He has to become the monsters in order to beat them.
To restore.
And I think that I kind of had the feeling that if he had stayed there any longer, it would have only further corrupted him
further. Yeah, I actually, that's a very good point. Or like, as soon as he goes into the city, he gives up on his vow of never using Muay Thai, and then eventually
he's sort of forced to, but he does.
And eventually he's pushed into using the rope fist technique or whatever. He binds his hands in ropes and fights people twice in this movie, where he had heard the story in the beginning that was why his master doesn't want him to actually use the Muay Thai that he has been taught, because he accidentally killed someone previously. And as it turns out, a lot of people,
500,000 people.
A lot of people die as a result of him being in the city and like trying to get the Ong-Bak head back. So that there's that as in terms of like the overall theme. I think that this movie is fairly strong in terms of themes. Not like the clearest and best movie ever in terms of that, but it's certainly,
it was certainly
got things
solid
going for
enough,
it.
like you said. So yeah, it was well done enough, and I will give it credit there.
All right, so it sounds like we're all going to give it a 1.
Yes.
Yep.
And let's move on to antagonist. So the big bad in this, his name is Kamtuan. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right.
Probably not, but good enough.
He's a wheelchair bound guy who has to speak through a voice box thing. Yeah. I forget what they're called, but he's got he's had the surgery because he smoked too much, and he still smokes through the hole in his throat, making him even more menacing, of course. I think that he's pretty good as the main antagonist. He's got his dragon, the guy who is his like right hand man and like bodyguard, I guess, who's named Saming Sibtid was his name, and
so many drugs.
He just loves to do steroids right before fights.
That's what makes him an awesome fighter, man. Obviously,
honestly, they both portray a good amount of like menace, I thought, and like at the same time being like kind of over the top villains.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
And like that's the thing. This is one of those questions I'm not sure what I'm going to give it yet, but I liked these characters. I'm not sure how effective they were as antagonists. I think they were pretty good, but I'm willing. I want to hear you guys.
Well, you're missing one who was the impetus for all the action, Don.
And Don,
who
yes.
The wannabe gangster who keeps fucking up.
He actually was the person I disliked the most, especially when he forced that woman to have a ton of
that got really
coke
dark
or heroin
for like one scene.
Which not that his character is likable, but made his character completely like I just wanted to see him taken down.
Yeah.
But it was somewhere between Big Trouble in Little China and Dick Tracy, almost in the portrayal of it was somewhere grounded somewhere in reality, but somewhere in cartoon. That's what I kind of want out of my martial arts films.
So yeah, that's what I was gonna say, right? He might as well have been like, "Hello, I am evil gangster, man." Like the second he was on screen, and all his little henchmen as well. But the thing is, like, that's something again you've seen that many times in a film and story like this, so it worked pretty well. Like, yeah, I think they did a good job with them as characters. Like, now, whether or not they are, like, the most complex villains ever, I would say no. Spoiler. But, like, yeah, like, for what it needed to be, for, like, again, the framework of the plot, especially when Ting goes to the city, like, yeah, it was totally fine. But, like, it's also was kind of cookie cutter and over the top. But, again, that sort of is part and parcel for something like this.
Yeah.
So.
It did feel like, somebody mentioned this, but it did feel like an anime villain.
Yeah,
at
but
several
that's kind
points
of
throughout,
like, but you've seen that before too.
I'm not mad at that. Like,
yeah.
I love anime, but
that's what I mean.
It was an interesting dynamic that the villains had between each other and between them and the heroes of the piece. I want to ask you guys a question, but if you want to go first, because this is kind of a side thing.
So then, just want to talk about their motives.
Okay.
All right. So the big bad is stealing Buddhas. Because he does not believe in spirituality. He doesn't believe in religion. He believes in the individual. And at one point he says, I am God because I get to choose whether you live or die right now. But that adds to the theme there of a person coming in to destroy like the simplicity of the religious life. And that's what this, if that's their argument that's the basis of like what the Thai culture should be about, going back to like that religious roots. And you have a city folk coming in and just not disrespecting it, but
actively
stealing away for their own profit. I think that he's a very effective villain for that. But he goes through the common flaw of a villain in this situation, where all he has to do is one act, hand over that one head, but his pride gets in the way. And if he just said, you know what? I recognize you as one of the most dangerous killers I've ever met in my life. Here's the head that you want. No,
you go your way and I'll keep doing my shit.
It's like John Wick, I think, had a number of those, which I know you're a big fan of. If you just did the one thing, just go, no, he decided to be prideful, cause the destruction.
Well, he wouldn't be a villain without that, of course. But like, no, that's a good point. Like the religion, like destroying the religious iconography and so forth, because his mindset is against that. And like, as he represented that. So like, yeah. You're right. That sort of gives him a bit more of a deeper layer than perhaps I thought of him originally. So I'm still probably going to end up giving antagonist a 1 at this point. Now that we've talked it out. What was your question?
I'm probably going to also give it a 1. But my random side question is, when Don stole the head, in that scene, they have the drunken uncle come in. Yes. At least I assume he was drunk, and he kept drinking stuff, so like whatever. But he comes in, sees people stealing it, but you don't see any of the thieves on screen. Did you guys feel like they were setting it up for a mystery, and then they're like, nope?
No.
They just have Don come in and like hit him in the back.
No, only because if you remember, even before that, he wanted to buy like the Buddha necklace.
Right. I thought they were setting him up as a red herring or something. And then they were like, nope, we're not doing that at all.
No, I mean, I didn't really get that sensation, that feeling at that scene, but so I didn't think it was gonna be like, oh, who done it? They know who done it. They gotta go track him down now.
The reveal was so quick that I didn't even have time to process if they were trying to set it up for anything other than
exactly.
It was like immediate, like what?
I'm surprised he knew who attacked him.
It was so, that's true too. He came from behind. Like, it was so strange. They focus on the uncle, right? They don't focus on what's happening in the room. He says, "Hey, you hooligans, like cut it out," as though he's about to get killed, and then everybody's gonna have to try and figure out what's going on. And he just gets hit with a board. He's like, "Oh, it's Don. Go get him. He's in the city. Like, I have his address." It was just a very strange way to go about it, but like, I wasn't mad at it. Again, I didn't think it was bad, but
it faked you out though.
It was not what I was expecting from that setup.
But it matched the sawing off of the giant Buddha head. That was the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very well bookended.
It was. I mean, they do have really good like callbacks in this movie.
Both giant heads were the downfall of the villain.
Yeah, exactly. In one case, literally, of course.
All right, so I guess we'll tie up antagonists there.
I'm giving it a 1.
You guys are giving it 1s?
Yep.
I think I'm gonna go with a 1 as well. I like the antagonist well enough, and actually, I'm glad that you reminded me that Don was definitely one of the 3 main antagonists in this.
For sure.
If not one of the 2, we might even be able to get rid of the the dragon bodyguard guy. Turns that. But anyway.
I mean, he was just an extension of the gangster guy, like pretty much.
Yeah.
But he was still certainly like a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's move on to protagonist. Ian, that's going to be you.
Okay. So I have a question for you two.
Mm-hmm.
How many protagonists are in here?
See, that's a good one because you might make an argument for Hum Lei being one when he shows up, or like when Ting finds him, and which is early enough, and they sort of like become partners, sort of like in a sense.
Yeah.
And I think he certainly has an arc. So I might make the argument that they are both protagonists to a degree.
You could make an outside argument that even Mui... I don't know, that's a tough one.
I think she was definitely more of a side character. If they gave her more to do, if she's more of a part of it, then yeah, I would say all three. But I think she sort of is just below that. But at this point, I think going into it that Ting and Hum Lei would be protagonists to me.
I might be trying to give her extra points because I liked her character, but
she's a
good character.
But yeah, I don't know if Hum Lei actually is a protagonist. If I'm really like digging into it, right? Like he is the side. He's definitely the sidekick of this story, right? It's not his journey,
but it becomes his. That's kind of my argument. But go on.
It's not. He dies for Ting's journey, but it's not. It's never really his journey.
No, there's a moment where it becomes his journey,
what I'm
and
saying.
You see it in his face.
Yeah.
But when he picks up the crumbled note from his father, and you can actually tell that the distinct part where
it was like his turning point.
Yeah, he has a switch from being the rascal who's only out for himself into the. That's the question is like. Is Han Solo the protagonist of Star Wars, or
exactly.
is Luke and
it's
Han
kind of the same question, right? Like he becomes part of this journey, and yes, he does take it on for himself, but it's never really about him. It's about Ting for sure.
Okay, then I'm giving it a firm 0, because Ting is the actor is a phenomenal martial artist, but his character has, if there is any arc to it, it's a anthill surrounded by mountains. Like there is nothing like it is basically a flat plain there.
Okay.
So yeah.
I mean, it is. He doesn't change.
In fact,
throughout this movie, he
learns that
very
violence is a good thing.
Actually, he does change immediately upon going to the city when he says, like, before he goes there, he says that he'll never use Muay Thai against anyone, and then he immediately does it throughout the entire movie.
Like I said, though, he was forced to, but...
I'm going to give him a 0. I think that, yeah, you're right, he is a phenomenal martial artist. I think that he does a good job playing that single-minded character who is like goal-driven, and he does have moments of just
doubt, setback, or does he kind of just fall into things?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't fall into them. He has become. I would say you're right. He doesn't have those setbacks. He's almost a Gary Stu character, where he can't lose. Like, I never felt like he was in any position to lose any fight throughout this movie. Which I kind of wish it was like more, other than the one that he actually did lose, and then you find out that it was rigged and he lost it on purpose. But in that regard, I mean, you're kind of right. He's a reason for this movie to happen, but he's not like anywhere near the best part of the movie, other than the style, like the martial arts.
The least interesting character in this film.
Yeah, in terms of like character development, he doesn't have any.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Two things: how much agency does he have? Thing that is, like, I would say not that much. He sort of like is pushed and shoved in a sense, sometimes by Hum Lei, sometimes just by the greater action or the villains even. And like, it's funny because like it's like a deja vu from when we did Ip Man, where Ian mentioned the same thing, where like you never, like, it's almost impossible that he's going to lose any fight, and like, so therefore the stakes in that sense aren't any. It's
interesting. We just did a video game episode, and you at one point, Ian, mentioned that there are games where the game moves around the central figure, like whatever you're playing as, and it felt like this movie was that for him. Like everything moved around him, and he kind of like just like reacted to it, but didn't change. He didn't change at all. Everything else changed around him. Yeah. And I think you're right. Like I think I'll probably give it a 0 for that in terms of that character.
Unless Hamlet is a protagonist as well, which
I'm going to speak about that.
Go ahead.
I mean, yeah. If we were saying it's just Ting who's the sole protagonist, and I would agree with giving it a 0. But here's my argument for counting Hamlet. He's set up like they mentioned him in the village before Ting even gets to the city.
Sure.
Right? So like he's a character, like so he has a history there. Now, when Ting first meets him, Hamlet's like he's running his household as George, etc. And like you follow a lot of that. You follow his gambling debts. Like in fact, one of the things that moves around him is when the I guess the local dealers or whatever like come to collect whatever debt he owes them, and that's why Ting has to fight them like in that big chase scene, right? So like then you cut to like his relationship with Moy, and like they're running their scam. Like there's that underground casino scene and so forth. So I'm saying is like, you certainly get a lot of his story and like what's happening to him, and he definitely has a turning point arc, as Ian mentioned, as well. And he's central to helping out Ting. Like he's the guy who knows all the connections. He knows where Don is, or knows at least where Don can be found. Right. So like I'm just saying like I think he's more of a protagonist role than not. So I think there's sort of like a 60-40 split maybe, but I count him as such.
When we did Heat of the Night. Mm-hmm. Did we count both police officers as protagonists?
I don't remember offhand 100%, but I think we did.
Because this is the thing is, I think that they have the partner role.
Yeah, that's kind of that's what I'm arguing for, at least.
Which you follow one person throughout the entire thing, but the partner is such an effective.
Yeah. Yes, he's such an important
Scott,
presence.
You kind of sparked something in my mind when you were talking there. Like I think that this movie hinges on Homela's story, and I think that
kind of what I'm saying,
is a very good point for making him a protagonist. A very good argument. You may have got me to change my score.
Yeah, you're right. Like the score on this question is going to depend upon if we count him as such or not. Certainly, it's right. So it's going to change. But I think in my mind, I do and did, and that was my evidence for that. And why I probably give him mostly this question a 1, mostly because of him.
Yeah, I mean, this whole movie revolves around his agency, right? Like his gambling debts and
right.
You know,
his life and his
whatever he can
story.
convince Ting to do is the reason that everything in this movie happens. Yeah, I guess he is.
You know what I mean?
I guess he is a protagonist. I think I'm gonna change my score to 1.
It seems like not obvious, but like it seems fitting to put him here than versus secondary.
What do you think, E?
I absolutely agree. I was initially going to give it, but it was sort of voted on to give Ting, so I gave my long speech. But I agree with Lee as a protagonist at 1.
It was not a wasted speech. It was very moving.
Oh, all of this is a wasted speech.
Well, we presented our cases at least, and that's where I come down on.
All right, so that's 1s all around for protagonists, it sounds like. And let's move on to supporting Scott.
All right, so speaking of that, so then I guess, like I said, you mostly have Moy. So like she's, I guess, a college student who's again running with the crew of Humlai and like again doing the little scams and so forth. And like she wasn't there a lot, but she was there enough as well. So I thought she was pretty good. Like you certainly follow her a bit as well, and you get like more details, or it's very heavily implied. You can figure out like, you know, what her situation is in her relationship with Humlai and so forth. And so I guess like other than that, like you said, you had drunk uncle or whatever. I don't even know if they said his name.
Uncle Mao.
In the beginning, was there for like 5 minutes. So like most of the other supporting characters, like I said, are like either the gang members, like the lower level ones, or the Fight Club people.
All the people that he fought.
Right. So like,
crazy idiots.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The rogues gallery of fighters.
So like, I'll probably give it a 1 for her because she was at least like, you know, the more fleshed out than everyone else. Because everyone other than that, they're just like basically cannon fodder for Ting to beat up or like have a big scene with in some way, shape, or form, like either a chase scene or a fight scene.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, they filled out the world of Bangkok and so forth and all. I guess the other one is like the guy that's gambling against the big bad like all the time.
I guess he was a mob boss too, or something like that.
No, I don't know. He's like a corrupt businessman who like frequents the fight clubs and gambles on them. It's like he was sort of comedic, but he was there a couple of scenes, like whatever. But again, he wasn't really that important.
He was because he is someone that the villain could monologue to without it being just or giving the mind of the villain without him doing monologues.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a very clever tool there.
Way to do it. Yeah.
Also, I have to say that what's the woman's name again?
Moy. Muay.
She was surprisingly complex, and particularly the self-destructive relationship she has with Hamlin, and that they're both are equally self-destructive to each other. But like in the end, with his dying words are like, "Leave this behind, go off to college, and make something of yourself. Don't continue in this world that we've dragged ourselves into." Very touching.
And her reaction to him dying is so good, and like so, she just kind of flips out a little bit, but like I think really well. Perhaps the best piece of acting in this movie was right there.
But like, I guess you haven't seen a loved one get crushed by a Buddha.
Not recently.
It's a very haunting experience.
Not recently, Christ.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, like I said, like that's probably why I'm going to give this question a 1 specifically because of her, and everything else worked perfectly fine. But it wasn't like it was just basically what it needed to be, and that's again perfectly fine for what that is.
Absolutely, yeah. I thought she was a very strong supporting character. Really, I thought she had some of the best lines in the movie too, and like she was kind of a badass like the whole time, like very very confident and like just cool under pressure.
She knew what she was about
until shit like really went bad, and then she kind of freaked out. But like, yeah, it was a well done, as you mentioned, complex character. Surprisingly for kind of
for what you might expect on the surface.
Yeah, how surface level this movie seemed at first. It really delved into a lot of interesting things as you went on further into it.
So. To bring up one, you mentioned this character, Drunkle.
So
Uncle
Mal.
More so than even the hero's journey, the drunk uncle, no matter what culture we look at, this archetype exists.
Yes.
And I think this really can be the unifying aspect to the entire world. We just need to get everyone to talk about their drunk uncles. And
then we can live in harmony.
Yeah,
exactly.
Maybe.
As long as he's going to give you sensu beans and you can go up and, defeat whoever. Frieza.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that supporting character was pretty good. Like you said, there were a bunch of other supporting characters. Like, there were just a bunch of fun characters that he fights throughout this that I'm never going to know their names or who the hell they were, but like
the host of the fights,
the MC guy.
I mean, they all had their own personality, which I appreciate in like a supporting character that's around for only 3 minutes. They're memorable.
That was like the over
big
the top
bear guy.
That was like the over the top like enemy kind of stuff, and it worked, like I said. But again, it's not like the most complex shit ever, but it's still fine.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give supporting a pretty strong one. It sounds like everyone else is as well.
Yep.
All right. Cool. So that's going to bring us to dialogue with me. And so it's interesting. Like, it's always interesting trying to take a foreign language film and
parse out.
Trying to figure out how good the dialogue was. Honestly, if this movie wasn't as funny as it was, dialogue would get a 0.
That's exactly what I was going to fucking say.
But it was hilarious. And I have to give the script credit for that. Like, it wasn't just like the physical gags, which were also very funny, but like there was really funny dialogue throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to give it credit for that. I mean, it was like a lot of it was like not the comedy, but like a lot of the regular stuff was just like exposition dump, or like I'm going to tell you what's going on now, or I'm going to give an evil villain speech, or like things like that, which were kind of eye-rolling, but they embraced it and like kind of went over the top with a lot of that stuff, and I think it made it a really funny. I think it completed a very funny movie, and I think I have to give dialogue a 1 for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna agree. So again, I can't help but compare it to Ip Man just because that's the most recent one we did before this in the same vein. But like, so that one was a bit more flat. This one, I think it had a bit more color flavor to it, if you will. You're right. Like, it was a bit more engaging, and whether or not the translation was 100% accurate or whatever, but it still worked. And yeah, it was funny when it needed to be, and then when it took like sort of a darker, like more serious turn, it still worked there. Like, I believe that parts of it too, and the things that people were saying when those scenes were happening. So yeah, this thing had a bit more to it. It wasn't just as flat / if not stilted, but again, like, it wasn't just like, we are now going to do this because we need, like, whatever. Like it had more life to it. So
Yeah.
I think it pops a bit more, and I'm gonna give it a solid 1.
So I'm going to do a comparison as well.
Okay.
This one to Kung Fu Hustle, which I saw recently. Kung Fu Hustle is a comedy movie with Kung Fu elements to it, and it's mocking or martial arts elements.
Playing with that,
kind of parodying that.
Right.
Where this was, I think, a straight up martial arts movie where they just had comedic elements to it.
Exactly.
And thus, a lot of the jokes came off organic as opposed to...
Yeah, good point.
At least they weren't trying to force in a joke to be a comedy. It was just like, this scene, I have a piece of dialogue that I could throw in here. Like, knives for sale.
The knives for
Yeah.
sale part is so good.
I was waiting for that in style, but it was perfect, yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good joke that's made better by a lot of dialogue in there.
Yep.
True. Good point.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, and there were, I mean, that was probably my favorite joke of this movie, but there were a lot of scenes like that like just have a funny line peppered in that really made the scene better.
I agree with that as well. Good call.
Dialogue's gonna be one for everybody, and Ian, you get the good one, style.
Well, I kind of just mentioned that it's a martial arts film that has comedic elements to it, and I think that for the most part, actually, the guy was very talented, and some of the scenes they did, there were cuts for things, and again, I'm trying to look because it's not my real the genre that I know very well, but I've learned a little bit about it, and I'm trying to. They have stuff where he's like jumping on one person to then kick a person behind him.
Yeah,
like
it's some impressive shit.
Like him basically stepping up walls. I really liked what this guy had to offer, and the comedy wise we just talked about. It has a very Blues Brothers scene in this.
Yep.
Oh my God.
One of the great. There's a chase with taxis, 3-wheeled taxis, and it is the most absurd thing in the world because I looked down for a moment and I saw them get into the chase with the villain Don taking one taxi and they were chasing him. I looked down for a second, I look up and they're being chased by a whole horde of taxis.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have no idea how any of this happened.
Dude, it was
but I'm so glad it did.
It was like some weird like bizarre French Connection shit like in Baghdad.
Yeah. But there are taxis flying off highways and blowing up. Oh, it was absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
No, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. Style is probably like one of the strongest points of this film. It was great. Like you said, all the acrobatics and the choreography was really good. And like the gags and like the whole chase scene when he's like jumping and flipping through shit. And all that was fantastic. And yes, the taxi whole bit was certainly a standout thing. And like again, like I said, when it needed to be serious, it was good at doing that. And when it needed to be like a bit more lighthearted, a bit more sort of like again over the top anime shit, especially the Fight Club, at least the early Fight Club stuff, that worked well. So and I'll leave one thing for you, Steve-O, that you'll get to. But yeah, I'm gonna give Style a pretty damn strong 1.
I loved almost all of the style of this movie. The martial arts, as you mentioned, phenomenal. Tony Jaa does a great job. The comedy, both physical and dialogue, as we mentioned earlier, was top notch. There's a scene where he's like running away from people and he like jumps, slides under a truck, jumps through a hoop of razor wire.
I think,
jumps between two mirrors.
He's flipping over tables and shit.
It's like everything from every cartoon and action movie you've ever seen in the world. And then they do a taxi chase scene later on. Like it's like a 15-year-old's dream of their like dream action movie. They're like, we're just gonna throw everything at this movie.
I forgot one thing that I must say because was interesting that it became annoying and then
I
became
think
amazing.
I was just about
Oh,
to
were you
bring
about
this
to-
up.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
So they throughout this movie, and I don't know where to land on this, do double and sometimes triple takes of like
Of the same
cool
move or whatever.
stuff that he does. So like when he slides under the van, they do a triple take. I think that was the first triple take. And like he slides under the van, and then they show it from another angle, and then they show it from another angle, and then the scene
Or
continues.
sometimes they show
It's
the
like-
same shot twice.
It feels like a skateboarding video from the 90s.
No, even better, they'll do a triple take of him like jumping over something, and then do a double take of him landing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. And I'm like,
But it
I-
works somehow. Like
I want to hate this, but it also makes me laugh so fucking hard every single time.
We were rooting for like a one
Yeah.
to come in.
I don't think they were like. There's a lot of this movie that's supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
I don't think that was supposed to be funny, but it was very funny.
it still worked. Like
So-
I get no. They basically want to be like, okay, we want to show you this cool shot, this cool move. Like again, like sure, but it comes off a little bit cheesy. But that it still makes it good. Like it doesn't like ruin it by any means. And in fact, like perhaps like you said, it wasn't intended to be that comedic, but it still is, and it's still highly entertaining.
No, yeah, it's
And it
very
still
cool
works.
things that are happening, but then you're like, we need to show you this
Yeah.
2 more times.
Yeah.
It eventually
Exactly.
becomes charming.
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is the-
Well
it's-
said. Yeah, yeah.
So,
I'll agree with that.
At least they're so dedicated to doing those like double and triple takes that you become ensconced
Yeah.
among it.
I almost kind of want to see that now in other movies just because of it. But
But the last thing that I have to mention about style, actually, I do want to mention one other thing. The cinematography of this movie is actually pretty damn good.
yeah, for sure.
If you look at like some of the shots that they get, there are a lot of really cool shots in this, which can get lost in like the hokiness of it at points and like the jokey nature of it. But I did want to mention that. And the last thing I want to mention is the music of this.
Yeah.
Your mileage may vary, I guess, but I fucking loved it. It felt like at times, like it has this like kind of old school Asian feel to it, and then at times it's like very like 90s
Yeah.
action movie type of thing. And then they have the taxi chase scene. They have this like kind of almost hybrid of those two styles.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And it's incredible. That's my favorite song of the thing. And then over the credits they have nothing in this is English language except for like a couple lines that one of the guys says. And they have an English language rap song over the credits at the end.
I think that was the one they could
Which
afford
is
the rights to.
Incredible. Like I don't know who was in charge of the music for this, but I would like to thank them.
Atomics Clubbing Studio.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Atomics Clubbing Studio. You mentioned that. You
Yes,
looked it up
they're
earlier.
there.
Well done, studio.
So good.
But
So
no,
good.
I agree.
Lived up
Like,
to your name.
This movie came out in around. I meant to mention this earlier. But this movie came out in 2003 in Thailand, and 2005 in America, and it feels like an American product of 10 years earlier.
yeah.
In terms of the music, and like, but for some reason, it makes me
But it
feel so much
works
better
really
about this
well.
movie. Yeah. So I'm giving style probably the strongest one of all of these questions.
Yeah, I'm
I
pretty
think.
much on board with that and doing the same.
All right. So that's ones all around for style, and
think
then recommendations, Scott.
Yeah,
Take us
man,
home.
I do indeed recommend this film. Like, again, so as we've been trying to expand a bit of our horizons and our critical knowledge, like, so these are films we're probably not very familiar with, and probably like our audience out there as well. But yeah, this one is on Hulu, I believe, so it's easily available and it's highly entertaining. Like we just said, it's I don't want to say surprisingly good. It just is a damn good film. That's just something you probably haven't heard of because it happens to be non-American, and it wasn't like, even within that arena, it wasn't like huge or anything, but it's a damn solid, entertaining, fun as hell action movie to watch with some very funny bits. And also, again, like I said, when the plot gets a bit serious, that's handled very, very well, deftly as well. So I wholly recommend this film.
If you're a fan of Rush Hour and those style of movies, I think you'll like this one. The elements of good martial arts with a good solid comedic base. Not base to it, because the base is martial arts, but with an element to it. I would recommend watching this with friends, though. And I wish kind of like I used to watch Friends in high school with a bunch of my friends.
Yeah.
We had bad horror movies. Not that this is a bad movie, just this is a fun movie to
Together.
watch with people.
Agreed.
And like revel in its just fun glory.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well said.
I
like that phrase.
I love Tony Jaa. He's like a mix between like Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee almost in terms of his style, like very cool martial arts, and he's got that like straight man thing. I think this might have been his first movie. So he goes on to make 2 more of these Ong-Bak movies
in the series of Ong-Bak,
and they're both prequels from like hundreds of years before. But and I think he's done a bunch of stuff since then. But yeah, very fun movie. Just
for sure.
Check it out.
It's a hell of a ride.
This movie reminds me of films that my buddy Morgan, who's been on the show a few times, used to show me back in high school. You know, like, check out this kung fu movie or whatever. Like it was just like, you know, on a Saturday afternoon we'd go and watch some kung fu movies or like martial arts movies. And this movie reminds me of that a lot. It's having a ton of fun and feels like very much in the vein of those old school movies, but with a stronger comedic element thrown in, which is really makes it an enjoyable
sort of
experience.
elevates it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give recommendation a 1. Sounds like we're all giving it a 1.
Yeah, man.
And,
sort of like a hidden gem, and now that we're telling you about it, definitely check it out.
Yeah. So that being said, anybody else have anything else to say?
No, I want to know what the scores are.
Scores 9s all around.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty strong, and you know, I think this is a very strong movie. If I was just like going off the top of my dome, I might give it like an 8, but I think a 9 is a very respectable score for this one. And
to be fair, we sort of like, depending like the protagonist thing, like that might have changed a little bit. But
yeah,
either way,
yeah.
At the end of the day, like you said, yeah, it's fucking very highly entertaining. And yes, I do recommend as well. You know, get a couple of people around and throw it on, because it's very, very fun to watch and enjoy. And the movie itself seemed like they all had fun making it.
Absolutely. I'm gonna probably enjoy talking about this for a while going forward. But I think that's gonna do it.
Yep.
I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Jonathan Ian Manzer.
I will soon be on a quest to find the severed head of Stephen Ramosi.
And Scott Thurlow.
And I'll be jumping through Ways of Wire sometime soon. See you next time.
Have a good night.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?